Have a think of that. Her name was that constant reminder, God has favored me, but if he's favored me, where are my children? Walking down the street, going to the shops, seeing the ladies, the women going to get all their groceries with their children. And there she is, Hannah. Oh, favored one. But I have nothing to show. How do we feel in those situations when people have something that we do not? It's a challenging question, but how do we feel when other people have something that we do not have? And, unfortunately, her husband didn't quite understand, because he says in verse 8, Hannah, why do you weep? Why do you not eat? Why is your heart grieved? Am I not better to you than 10 sons? Hopefully your husbands don't say things like that to you. Oh, my child is being like this. Oh, but I'm a husband. I'm better than all the kids. So not the best way to go about problem-solving situations like this. But it continues on to give us the reading of what happened there, because even though she had the promise within her name, favored, gracious, loved by God, she was still waiting to see the reality of that promise. Hearing her name, she would have thought, God has to do something, because it's even in my name. I'm meant to be favored. Where is his promise? So as you see, when we go into the story a little bit further, in verses 10 and 11, it says, she was in bitterness of soul and prayed to the Lord and wept in anguish. Have you ever had prayers like that? We're weeping in anguish. I can see some people nodding. And I think it's, particularly if you are a parent, there are times where you do. I know there have been times where I have probably given my reason for my parents to weep in anguish as well. But there are moments where in bitterness of soul, we realize that we need God in a special way. And here she is, even though she is sad, even though she is grieving for something she's never had, she's still praying. And that's an encouragement to us, because sometimes, we sort of think, well, being a Christian means always having the happy face the happy smile and having the happy face. But as we can see here, being a Christian sometimes means that you're going to go through bitterness of soul. And that's okay. It's real. But when we are in that bitterness of soul, pray to the Lord. Don't just stay in that bitterness, but take it to God. Because that's exactly what Hannah did. She was in that place. But even though she was weeping, even though she could only offer a sad prayer, it was a prayer that God was more than willing to take. And whether our prayers are happy prayers, or whether our prayers are sad prayers, whether our prayers are done on our knees, when we're standing, when we're crying, when we are at our wits' end, God will take all of our prayers. It says in verse 11, she made a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your maidservant and remember me, and not forget your maidservant, but will give your maidservant a male child, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor shall come upon his head. I love this, because this is a picture of a woman who is weeping, but a woman who is holding to her faith. Even though the Lord had closed her womb, her heart was still open to God. See, it doesn't matter where we are, if we are praying, God will do what is best for us. and the best for our children or for the people around us. But the question is, does our faith extend beyond our circumstances? Is your faith only circumstantial? Is your faith real from moment to moment? Are we willing to trust God beyond what we can see? Because at that moment, Hannah was not seeing anything. She was not seeing the reality of a promise. She wasn't even seeing anything at all. All she knew was that the only person that could help her was God. And she uses those words, remember me. When else in Scripture do we hear those words, remember? Okay, right, at the cross, do this in memory of me. What else? The thief on the cross, remember me. Yeah, those were his words, and they're the same words that she utters in these moments. Remember me. Just as the thief said, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Hannah comes before the throne of grace to ask the same thing. Remember me. I know that many of us are sitting here today with our own moments where we have gone to God and when we have asked, remember me. Maybe there are times where we feel a little bit forgotten, or we feel like, is God listening? Because I have this many children and this child is doing this and this child is over there and this child's making these decisions. I'm sure that at any moment in the week, many of those who are mothers are thinking about their children, the decisions they're making, the people they're marrying or are in relationship with, the children they may have. And it's a source of thinking constantly. I know that my mum is constantly thinking. And there are times where you probably think, what is God doing for this child of mine? This child who maybe has walked away from the faith. This child who is living a different lifestyle or doing their own thing. I want to encourage you and remind you that God listens to mums. God listens to mums. And I think in a very special way, he listens to them because God is a parent. And when we look at everything that has happened in this world, the perfect God, the perfect parent, and still his children rebelled. So when parents think, oh, could I have done something different? God did everything perfectly. It was no reflection on God. And still we all went astray. So when something happens, don't blame yourself, but instead keep asking God, remember me and remember the children that I have. As the story continues there, it says that now in verse 12, and it happened as she continued praying before the Lord that Eli watched her mouth. Now Hannah spoke in her heart. Only her lips moved, but her voice was not heard. Therefore, Eli thought she was drunk. So Eli said to her, how long will you be drunk? Put your wine away from you. But Hannah answered and said, no, my Lord, I am a woman of sorrowful spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor intoxicating drink, but have poured out my soul before the Lord. Do not consider your maidservant a wicked woman, but out of the abundance of my complaint and grief, I have spoken until now. You know, obviously there were things that were happening in the kingdom of Israel in that time that were not meant to be happening. There was a lot of things, even in the temple. And the children of Eli were not responsible leaders. They were leading There was all kinds of things happening. If you read into the situation, lots of things that were not exactly what you would expect of Christian leaders. And I think Eli, because he knows that his sons are giving a bad example to others, he's thinking the worst of everybody else as well. And so he sees this woman crying and he thinks, well, she must be doing the same as other people, drinking, carrying on. And instead she says, no, it's my suffering that has me this way. But he gives her the promise in verse 17, go in peace. And the God of Israel grant your petition, which you have asked of him. Go in peace. Eli had a great responsibility, but those words would have changed everything for Hannah. Go in peace. How many times did Jesus say those same words? Go in peace. The story kind of ends with Samuel. It says in verses 18 to 20, and she said, let your maidservant find favor in your sight. So the woman went her way and ate, and her face was no longer sad. Then they rose early in the morning and worshipped before the Lord and returned and came to their house at Ramah. And Elkanah knew Hannah, his wife, and the Lord remembered her. Interesting. I don't think that God ever forgot. But it's interesting that the very word that she used in her prayer, remember me, it was like she's saying, please have compassion on me. And the words there, God remembered her.